I'm up at rightlyconcerned.com today explaining a little bit more of my thinking. But remember, John says in 1 John chapter 2, he says this, "Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming," that would be the Antichrist with a capital A. He says, you've heard that he's coming. We've been transparent about that. Jesus said he was coming. We've said he's coming. So now many antichrists have come. Therefore, we know that it is the last hour. So he says, we know that there is a big A antichrist that's coming. But right now, even as we speak, John says, there are many small a antichrists that have come and that are operating in our culture. And I would suggest to you that the same is true today. I mean, John had to be talking about somebody. And who is an antichrist? Well, what does the word anti mean? It means you're against something. You're against somebody, or you're against some principle or some agenda, whatever it happens to be. You know, our secular fundamentalist adversaries always call us anti-stuff, anti-gay, anti-abortion, anti-union, whatever the case happens to be. So someone who is an antichrist with a small a is simply someone who is working at cross purposes with Christ, working against the mission, working against the goals, working against the purposes of Jesus Christ. If they're resisting Christ and his truth, his mission, his objectives, his values, then they are anti-Christ, not big A antichrist. I've never said Barack Obama is the antichrist, but he is an antichrist with a small a because he is working relentlessly against the goals and the values and the purposes of Jesus Christ. And I pick three examples in my column today. The first is liberty. And what does 2 Corinthians 3:17 say? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, referring to Jesus, where the Spirit of Jesus is, there is what? There is freedom. There is liberty. And yet President Obama is restricting the liberty of Christians in this country to make a decision to refuse to provide abortion-inducing medication to their own employees at their expense. They say, no, I'm not going to kill a baby. I'm not going to pay to have a baby killed. Not going to do it. Violates my deeply held religious principles. Constitution guarantees freedom of liberty. I'm going to stand on the First Amendment. And President Obama says, like heck you will. Your First Amendment, religious liberty, it means nothing to me. It means zero to me. I'm completely against religious liberty. I'm against your freedom. What you do by 11 to noon in your own church building, that's fine. He calls it freedom of worship. That's not what the Constitution guarantees. The Constitution guarantees freedom of religion. That means 168 hours a week, ladies and gentlemen. We have not only a God-given but a constitutionally protected right to the free exercise of religion. Barack Obama wants to restrict that to 1 hour a week between 11 and noon on Sunday. That's why he calls it freedom of worship. He's basically saying, I don't care what you do in your churches between 11 and noon. I don't care what songs you sing. I don't care what sermons you preach. That's absolutely fine. But the rest of your week belongs to me. And you do not have liberty the other 167 hours. In the Constitution, the Founding Fathers beg to differ. So President Obama is against liberty. He is against Christ. He is an antichrist because he opposes what Christ is for, which is religious liberty and freedom of conscience. Now, we know that Jesus is unalterably opposed to the dismembering of babies in the wombs of their mother. I can say that without fear of contradiction. I can say that unequivocally. You ask the question, does Jesus support the dismembering of babies in the wombs of their mothers? The question answers itself. He's horrified at that. It's appalling to him. It's an abomination in his sight. And yet Barack Obama is working with every means at his disposal to protect that practice, to continue the funding pipeline to Planned Parenthood. When he was a state senator in Illinois, 4 times he used his influence to protect infanticide. That is, babies who survived abortion. They were American citizens. They were the newest citizens we had. He supported the practice of tossing them into the corner of the hospital laundry room and being left there to die with no attention, with no medical help, with no care. That's President Obama. Is Christ for that? No, he's against that. And who is against Christ? Barack Obama. That makes him an antichrist on the issue of the sanctity of life. Now, we know from what Jesus himself taught in Matthew 19 that he believes marriage is the union of one man and one woman. He quoted Genesis 2:24. and put the words that came out of his own mouth. So you got God in Genesis 2 defining marriage. You have Jesus in Matthew 19 reaffirming God's definition of marriage. And it's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. What God has defined, man cannot, must not, may not redefine. So marriage is the union of one man and one woman. That is Christ's mission. That's his agenda. That's his value. Is Barack Obama for that or against it? He is against it. He is working now ceaselessly to legitimize marriage that is based on the act of sodomy. That makes him an antichrist. He's working against Christ in the areas of religious liberty. He's working against Christ on the sanctity of life. He is working against Christ when it comes to the sanctity of marriage. That makes him a small a antichrist. You know what I say at the end of my column? Look, if somebody's got a problem with this, somebody objects to this characterization of the president as a small a antichrist, then maybe that's an indication that he too is working against Christ and his purposes. Now, when we come back out of the break, I want to play you a couple of sound bites from Dr. Benjamin Carson. He is the pediatric neurosurgeon that spoke at the presidential prayer breakfast on last Thursday. We played the sound bites for you on Friday, and they were powerful. They were absolutely great sound bites. That's an example of speaking truth to power. He went right at President Obama, and he spoke truth to power. It was very direct. It was very appropriate. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. Everything was right about it. In fact, probably what we'll do when we come back is maybe play some of the reaction to his comments, some of the criticism he's taken from the left. And then I want to play a couple of sound bites for you. He was speaking, I believe, at a Seventh-day Adventist conference about the issue of evolution and creation. And you will hear that he is an unapologetic supporter of the creation account that's found in the scriptures and is flatly opposed to Darwinian evolution. And remember, this guy, I mean, they can, you know, secular fundamentalists can call other people yahoos and uneducated and ignorant, even though they're generally speaking flat wrong when they say that. But nobody's going to accuse Dr. Benjamin Carson of being uneducated or ignorant. He is one of the world's leading pediatric neurosurgeons. Saved countless lives of countless babies. Talking this morning to someone who had a child that was whose cerebral palsy was considerably mitigated by a surgical procedure done at Johns Hopkins under the tutelage of Benjamin Carson. World-class scientist, world-class medical professional. So nobody can criticize him for a lack of brain power. And he says, look, Darwinian evolution is preposterous. Back in 2 Focal Point AFR Talk.